Hi everybody, this is Jason Eagle, your natural health authority, with another Healing Matters podcast, and YouTube and Facebook Live and Instagram and whatever your grandma and your grandpa wants to talk about, but especially grandma and grandpa wants to talk about low back pain. And a lot of people get low back pain, and we can be old, we can be young. And the trick about low back pain is, what is it? Where does it come from? There's lots of reasons of why you have your low back pain. And the trick in terms of treating it is addressing and finding out where it's really coming from. And there are many conditions that you would never think that's why it is. So let's first go over about what the low back is. Low back would be typically in the low back, above the butt crack, but low back can be all the way up into kind of like the middle of your back, the mid-low back. So when we're talking about the low back, medically speaking or anatomically speaking, we're talking about the lumbar vertebrae. Vertebrae, those are the spine bones. Now, everything's surrounded by muscles and everything has nerves going through it. That's the main reason of why we have a spine. And that's where they get that number 33 from, in terms of the Masons and all that whole thing, but also where you get freezing water, and water freezes at 32, but at 33 degrees, water turns into liquid. We do have 33 vertebrae. The vertebrae is the backbone, what you would call the backbone. Now that not only holds your structure up, meaning kind of like your car, it's the frame. So the frame, your bones are the frame. But more importantly, it's what holds the nerves. So your spinal cord goes down through the middle of it, and each vertebrae is separated by a disc that's in between, and a disc is like a inflatable tire. It keeps or like a air shock in a car. It's kind of a liquid filled sack, a jelly filled sack that allows for this compression to happen, but a bounce back. So it's kind of like a shock absorber. Okay. But it also holds what's called disc space, because at each vertebrae, so again, your brain is what controls everything, every single thing in your body that you can think of. Me talking to you, you listening to me, you thinking about this, is all your brain. It's all electrical activity, and it has to go down these living wires, which are the nerves. Your brain is this ball of goo up inside your head. It's actually a very fatty tissue. And your spine is fatty tissue. So just like the octopus, if you think about like an octopus or squid, they have their main body. Or think about a spider. The spider has its main body. Its legs and tentacles are also part of our body. Just like if you think about a tree, and in fact, our nerves look exactly like this. You've got the tree, which is the branches and the leaves that are above that, and then it goes to the trunk of the tree, and then it goes to the roots. Well, your nerves, so your brain controls everything, and so it goes down the spinal cord, and we think of the spinal cord, when they show it, they basically show it as kind of like, almost exactly like a tadpole, or what a sperm would look like. A tadpole looks like a sperm, which is, you got its main bulbous body, this round thing. Now, your brain is 2 hemispheres, so it kind of looks like a half round thing and a half round thing with this kind of space down the middle, and then a tail, okay? That's your spinal cord. But what they don't show is that the spinal cord then turns into, at each vertebrae, so when you feel in your neck and you feel all the way down your back, those backbones, each one is the arms come out. There's peripheral nerves, because your body is eventually basically like folded in half, which is, you've got the right side, you've got copies. You got a right side and you got a left side. So you got nerves that have to go off to the right side of your body, and nerves that have to go off to the left side of your body. Now, if you go up to the brain, it's the left side of the brain, it crosses. The left side doesn't control the left side of the body. The left side of the brain, the left hemisphere of the brain, hemisphere meaning sphere is a round, hema means it's half of a hemisphere. So half of the sphere controls the opposite side of the body. It crosses. So the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. The right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. Everything, eye, arms, legs, shoulder, everything, okay? So, but at each vertebrae, that's when it then, the spinal cord, which is going down, then splits out. So if you were to look at me, sticking my arms out, I've got my head here, and then inside my shirt, you see my arms come out my sleeves. And see, if your sleeves are too tight, it's pinching on your arm. You ever been in a shirt where it's too tight and it pinches on your arms and your arms start to go numb? Okay, that's akin to what we would call nerve compression if it's coming from at the spine. That's one of the tricks to where is some of your pain coming from. So each vertebrae is this disc, or I'm sorry, essentially like the vertebrae is like a concrete block. Okay, think about like a concrete block, and they're very, very hard and they're very concrete, but they're also, I'll get into this, it's all electromagnetic. It's all, you are like a maglev train. I'll get into that. That's high level stuff, but we're just talking about the physiology right now. So each vertebrae is like a concrete block that is on top of an inflatable tire that's on top of another concrete block. So let's say you stack 33 blocks on top of each other, a block with a inflatable tire, block, inflatable tire. And coming out each right side and left side, in between those concrete blocks, right where the disc is, that's where what's called the peripheral nerve comes out. So there's what's called the nerve root. So there's the main nerve that goes down the spinal cord, and then it branches out, and then it gets thinner and thinner and thinner. Just like when you think about like the roots of a tree or a branch of a tree, when it's close to the tree trunk, close to the spine is where it's thickest, and then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it goes out to very, very tiny little ones, and those are the peripheral nerves. So at your fingertips, that's where they're the tiniest nerves. That's where they're the smallest nerves. But they all connect to that main tree branch. That's the spine. Okay? So now we're talking about low back pain. Okay? So one of the things about low back, which is that's down all the way at the bottom of your back, in the lumbar vertebrae, you have 5 lumbar vertebrae. Let's go over those numbers. You've got 7 of the cervical vertebrae. You've got 12 of the thoracic, that's the thorax, or that's basically the chest where the ribs are. And then you have 5 of the lumbar vertebrae, and then the rest are all in what's called the sacrum. And the sacrum, when you're a little kid, when you're a little baby, they're individual, and then they tend to fuse together, but they're not really fused together. Just like your skull is not really fused together. It has sutures where it opens and closes. So within all of these vertebrae, like I say, when we get down to the low back are the chunkiest of the actual vertebrae, or the concrete blocks. They're the biggest concrete blocks, the biggest mothers, right down in there. Also, if you think about standing in gravity, that's where the heaviest weight is on. And also, when you think about, okay, like, playing that game Jenga, you ever playing stacking the blocks, okay? Well, if you stack them perfectly on top of each other, they're very stable. But if you move, especially the top block, which would be your head, a little forward or a little back or a little right or a little left, it tips the whole thing over. And so when our head goes forward or our shoulder goes forward, this is one of the keys of why we see so many neck problems, but especially low back problems, is people in forward head posture with their faces in a screen, okay? Because there's an actual calculation of a measurement, which is if you have perfect posture, if you see a person with a military posture where their ear is stacked over their shoulder, is stacked over their hip, is stacked over their knee, is stacked over their ankle, and if the ear is in line with the ankle all the way down, then it means, like the Jenga blocks, it's stacked perfectly straight, which means the compression is straight down, and that is going to create the least amount of weight pressure on any one section of the blocks. But if you move it forward, a person on a computer all the time, a person with their head forward. So the calculation is for every inch forward that the head goes out of that alignment, you add extra pressure. So you're going to have, let's say, 5 pounds at the cervical neck, an extra 5 pounds. In the middle of the cervical back, it's an extra 20 pounds. You get down to the low back and it adds up. It's an extra 60 pounds or more. So if you get a person, when you see a person that has forward head posture, their ear is about 2 inches in front of that, and then when they bend over and they're leaning forward, that's compressing on that low back spine. So let's say you got a person that's like 2 to 3 inches out of what's called plumb, which is that plumb line, and then they're bending over. You're adding something like 300 to 500 pounds per square inch squishing those blocks, okay? So that's why posture is so important. And that's why the low back takes such a beat up, because the structural things in terms of this heavy head, and think about it, most people have about a 14-pound bowling ball on top of their head. The skull is very, very heavy. That's why you're never going to see a robot that is like us walking around. If you do have a robot that is modeled after a human, the brain, or in terms of all of the weight, is not going to be in the skull. It's going to be in the chest. Because to get a robot, that's why you're not seeing robots walking around, because to walk what's called bipedalism with 2 feet with this super heavy head, it's impossible. Like, we are so incredibly engineered. We are so wonderfully created. They really are never going to create it. You know, when you see those Boston Dynamics things, they're just like 4-legged animals. They cannot figure out how to do, they won't, because the calculating power, that's how important our brain is. But our brain is not just our brain. Your brain is your feet. Your feet is sending signals. Your brain is your hands. Your brain is every part of your body. Your brain is your inner ear. Your brain is all of your senses. And the most difficult thing that the brain does is keeps you upright. And it's all stacked on that low back. Okay, so that low back takes a beating. Okay, so number one, we're talking about these structural type of things. If you're out of structural alignment with forward head posture, that's going to really put a lot of problems on your back. Okay, so one of the first things I talk to about people is whether you got a bad back or you want to make sure you have a good back, fix your head, get your head on straight. So many times doing your stretching, doing your yoga stretching, getting one of those yoga balls, doing your back bends, you know, for every forward head posture, you should be stretching your head back, getting a foam roller and rolling backwards, getting your head back. Having a chiropractor, having a massage therapist, having a physical therapist work with you to help to get your head back. And especially when you see your kids right now, because if your kid, you know, think about, like, let's say if you're 60 years old, right? You never grew with you didn't grow up as a little kid with your head stuck in a screen. And so that didn't happen until you were 30s or 40s or whatever. As soon as they're babies now, they're on these screens and their heads are forward, and it's causing a lot of neck damage, and they're going to have this generation is going to be in a lot of trouble when they get older. And so if we get on them right now, and because you can reverse this stuff, you can actually fix this stuff. For every problem that you have, there's a solution. You just got to know what it is, okay? So structural stuff is huge, okay? Then the other thing that's really huge is now you've got your heart that is sending blood flow. And the blood flow has to go through your spine too, right? Because these discs that are inside there, so one of the problems of a back problem of what's called a bulging disc or a herniated disc or a ruptured disc. These are the different stages. They're essentially the same thing, but one is the beginning stage and one is the ending stage, which is the tire bulging out of, your bike tire. Is it starting to form a bulge? And then it has it completely popped and then just, spilled all its guts out. Okay. And many people, when they get talking about low back pain, they're, especially in Western America, their first thing, especially if they're, let's say, 50 or 60 years old, the first thing that they go to is, oh, I got to get back surgery. Oh, I got to get cut. Let me tell you, back surgery, especially low back surgery, has some, you may be successful in getting a stenosis or getting, basically a fusion or all these things because you ruptured a disc and now there's nothing left, or all of those bones have grown together, and so the surgery is there. There's success rates, and low back surgery has a very low success rate comparative to other ones. Carpal tunnel syndrome surgery has a very low success rate. And so it really behooves a person to do whatever you got to do to not get cut. And, again, you're going to have a doctor that's going to be cut happy and say, oh, sure, I can cut you up, or a person who says, oh, I need to get this replaced. Grandma and grandpa, first thing they go, I need to get this hip replaced. Well, what would it be if you could rejuvenate it? And what if you could rejuvenate it without having to even inject yourself with stem cells or something like that, right? Let alone do surgery. What if you could fix it before it even started, or even as it gets further along? And what if you could fix it? Here's the other thing. There's a lot of hidden things that go there. So let me go back to what I was saying. Blood flow, okay? And then that's your heart. So one of the leading connections to low back pain is a condition called atherosclerosis. What is that? That's plaque. So we thought that it's just about a heart attack or a stroke, okay? Meaning when you start to form those plaque deposits, we know that when that clogs your heart, then the heart will stop. Or when it gets stuck in your brain, you're going to have a stroke, okay? But the early warning signs for that is low back pain. When they do a lot of studies and they do MRIs and dissections and all, when you look at the little blood flow that is going to those discs have to be fed, and your bones have to be fed. They have to get blood flow. And there is big blood vessels and there's tiny little blood vessels, and that's where the plaque deposits tend to build up and cause blockages. So many times a low back pain, especially as it's starting early, and it wasn't from, let's say, you pulled your back or you fell skiing or something like that, traumatic types of injury type of thing, that's a different story, and we'll talk about that. We're talking about these insidious things, which is, my back just started hurting me and I wasn't in a car crash, or, I fell a little bit, but it wasn't anything that I should have broke my back. Atherosclerosis, which is the first warning signs that you will start to feel it, is not necessarily in your heart. It will be in your spine. It will be in your low back. And so these blood vessels start to get clogged up, and what happens is then your discs start to literally dry up. So they start to shrink because, again, they get pumped up with fluid. One of the most important fluids is what's called high hyaluronic acid, glucosamine chondroitin. Chondroitin is inside there. Your discs are a cartilage. They are a cartilage sac that is filled with this jelly. Cartilage like in your nose, or like your ears, like the tops of your ears, not the little floppy things at the bottom, not your earlobes, but the top, or your nose, that flexible thing. That's cartilage. Okay, that's what is also in your joints. And every spine segment, every vertebrae is a joint. We think about fingertips and we think about knees and ankles, those are joints. But we tend to forget that each vertebrae is a joint, and there's multiple joints in each side or each part of the vertebrae, because it has to move in all of these, like an airplane, right? Controlling a car, you just go right, left, right? Turn the wheel this way, turn the wheel this way, and then go and stop. That's all you have. But in an airplane, you got to have these rudders and these other, because what it does is, just like your vertebrae, is it can tip to the right, tip to the left, tip forward, tip backward, and go up and go down. So it has what we call an axes. It has not just X, Y, Z. It's got multiple axes of movement. You know, when you see these people doing gymnastics or these people doing like these back bends and stuff like that, it's incredible how flexible a back can get. You'd think a person's going to break your back. I was just watching this video of this like gymnastic girl, and she's basically kissing her butt, right? She's bent all the way backwards. I mean, it's incredible. Both ways, backwards and forwards, twisting all the way around. Like people can twist almost like a, like an owl. An owl can twist people can twist their not just their neck, but their whole body around, especially that low back or the mid back. There's a lot of flexibility there. And that's what we should be. But to keep it flexible, things just like the baseball glove, to keep it flexible, it has to be oiled. It has to be lubricated. And when it dries out, and it dries out because of three things: water, because the fluid that's inside that disc in each vertebrae, there's got to be water in there too. There has to be oil, so we have to be like the Tin Man and we have to be oiled up. And then there has to be blood flow. And blood does three things, essentially. Is it brings food, is it takes the garbage out, and it brings oxygen, and it takes the carbon dioxide out. Oh, and then there's actually a fourth thing, and that's nerves, that's electricity, electromagnetic, okay? And that's what the spine has to be. It's the central nervous system core, and core muscles are there, and that has to be the most amount of electricity flow. It is. That's why it's the biggest wire, and there's a lot of electromagnetic flow there, okay? So there's a lot of stuff that has to be happening in the back. So let's go back to atherosclerosis, which is if you're starting to get clogged arteries, most people go, well, we're going to do that for my heart. But most people, hardly anybody talks about this. Even the cardiovascular guys don't talk about low back pain being an early warning sign or a mid sign or being just as equal as your heart being clogged. Especially being early warning sign. Cardiovascular people should basically begin, one of the first questions should be, do you got low back pain, right? That's a good sign that you may have this clogging of the arteries. So what do you do to unclog these arteries? You got to change your diet, okay? So we know that cholesterol and stuff like that. And so, if you have a lot of plaque deposits, it's been proven, and I agree with it, which is the plant-based diet, low cholesterol diet, but I will go a next step further, which is low sugar. The first thing that everybody should do, whether you're going to do keto or whether you're going to do plant-based or you're going to do, there's even some extreme diets of the rice, what's called the Kemper rice diet, which is taking these people and just put them on plain white rice, and people go, well, that's pure sugar. Well, yeah, but it's a very restrictive diet. There's lots of different diets, put it that way. There's a lot of different diets. And a restrictive diet is essentially atherosclerosis or arthritis or something like that. The problem is you got too much of something, too much of these cholesterol deposits. Like you're a hoarder, a person who shops too much, a person that just keeps buying and buying and buying, and then it just fills up their closet and they never eat it. And so it just builds up and builds up. So how do you fix that person? Well, you can send a person to clean it out, or you could get them early and say, stop shopping and just eat that stuff. Live off of your pantry. So that's what the plant-based diet is. That's what a low cholesterol diet, that's what a low sugar diet, that's what these type of diets do, which is you're in a deficiency of these essential fatty acids. Now, that being said, you also want to eat high levels of the good fat. You want to stop the bad fats, especially the trans fats and the artificial fats, and just stop eating the junk food and eat more plants, and then there's some very specific plants that can actually grab onto these deposits and pull these things away. And then you will start to pull it out of not only your veins and arteries around your heart and your brain, but in particular out of the low back. You will get the stuff out of the low back, and that will really start to, if the problem of the low back pain is coming from that, and a lot of it is, that helps the low back pain. Now, the other thing is there's another organ there right in the low back that a lot of people don't think about, and that's the kidneys. The kidneys, when they start to get jammed up, when the kidneys as a filter start to get clogged up, they will start to send pain signals in that low back. The pain signals will be right in the low back. The pain signals will go down into the butt cheek. So a lot of times when they think about like sciatica, sciatica is a low back pain. It's a pinching on that nerve, and there could be two different forms of sciatica. One which is coming right from the spine, or two coming from a butt muscle called the piriformis. One's called true sciatica, one's called false sciatica. It's also called wallet sciatica because there's a lot of guys that sit their butt on a fat wallet and it pinches on that nerve right in their butt cheek, okay? But, you know, these are also the same pain signals coming from a kidney reflex pain. Person gets a kidney stone. Now, a lot of people know you're going to have a lot of pain from a kidney stone, but there's early warning signs of a stone. A stone means that it's clogged up one of the tubes, but a stone always starts with sand, starts with smaller little deposits, okay? Gout is one of these other things. You can get gout in the low back pain, and that's just excess amounts of uric acid deposits, these crystals that form. Where did those crystals come from? Those crystals came from because, like the crystals in your feet of uric acid, when a person's got like a gout attack in their ankles or their toes or their knees, it's because first thing happened is the kidney started jamming up and it wasn't filtering well enough. And so a lot of the signs of a back pain, low back pain problem is this jammed kidney. So there are some great things that you can do to clean the kidneys out, and that's non-medical stuff. The Montmorency tart cherry juice, celery juice. There's the potato juice, the russet potato juice recipe. You can go to my website and you can email me. And in fact, on my YouTube, I have one of my YouTube videos is how to get rid of kidney stones. And I tell you how to get rid of it. I've had people who were scheduled for kidney surgery and they did this, and literally in 2 weeks they went back and they go, your kidneys are clean. But more importantly, I've had people who were just having this back pain and they did the russet potato juice, and within a couple weeks they're like, my back feels so much better, okay? So if it's coming from these organs, that's where the diet type of stuff happens. Now we get into the other mechanical stuff, which is the tight muscles. So the tight back muscles or tight leg muscles, when you get a magnesium deficiency. So now we're getting into some of the chemistry, which is sometimes those vertebrae are being squished and your discs are being squished and they're pushing out on the nerves. And so if you think remember I talked about the low back, which is you got concrete block and then a inflatable tire. If the concrete blocks are being squished together, what's going to happen is those discs start to bulge out. And if it tips to one side, it's going to bulge out. So a lot of times when people say they're having numbness or pain, the low back pain on the one side, and it's coming from a disc, it's because the other side is tight, like a teeter-totter. So it's really, a lot of times, especially in this low back pain, the problem is not coming from where your pain is. The problem is coming from the opposite side. So, but again, what's the problem? The problem is the muscles are tight and they're squeezing. So stretching is another thing, but you get people that when you have a magnesium deficiency, you can't stretch. You can't stretch because if the muscles do not have enough magnesium, they're not going anywhere. You can try and stretch it all you want and it's not going anywhere. And a lot of times it can make it worse. So people with low back pain, get on magnesium. There's a lot of different forms. I like the powdered forms. Premier Research Labs makes a really good one that's a watermelon type. There's this other one that's called Calm, which is a mixture of calcium, magnesium. They're better than pills. You can take them in some liquid. There's some other companies that make it as a liquid with other minerals. Epsom salt baths, okay? Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. It's pure magnesium. And so when people are having back pain problems or disc problems, start taking Epsom salt baths. Epsom salt bath is 4 pounds of Epsom salt. Oh my God, Jason, that's a lot. No, it's not. It's cheap. Most people, I take Epsom salt bath, you're putting a handful in there, 2 cups. It doesn't do anything other than soften your skin. You got to have a high concentration. 4 pounds of Epsom salt, and you soak in that tub for at least an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. I stay for an hour and a half sometimes, or 2 hours. And people go, well, doesn't the water get cold? Not really. You know, you're in there and you cool down with it. Make it good and hot. I watch a movie, I read books, I listen to books on tape or, you know, scripture or whatever. Take a nap, whatever you got to do. And I've had so many people who have struggled. I don't want to do it. I want to do it. And then as soon as they start doing the Epsom salt baths and the magnesium, they're like, oh my God, I can't live without it. It's such a huge difference. And then after you get those muscles loose, then start doing your stretching. Some of the best stretching is laying on the floor. Like, you know how dogs and cats do. They lay and they stretch. And you twist your back and you move. You pull your knees up to your chest. There's all kinds of stretching. Stretching the quads and the hamstrings. These big, huge, meaty muscles are usually the major culprit that is literally squishing the back down too. And they're underneath that low back, but they're pulling it into this deep vortex. So stretching the muscles. Come to see a massage therapist like me. I am a deep tissue massage therapist. I do medical massage, deep sports massage, and anyone will tell you, like, you know, they call me the fix-it man. I'm the fix-it shop, and I twist you up. I get deep in there and I move it and I twist it, but I also will stretch. There's times I get up on the table and I pick your body up. You know, you're always covered with the sheet and stuff like that, so, you know, don't worry about, you know, getting anything exposed. I'm very professional. You'll see on my website, I actually do this shiatsu. Well, I'll put people on the mat. I put them down on the floor and I stand on them. I put my heel into them. I put my knee, I twist them. And then sometimes too, I use an inversion table. That's another great tool that a person can get with bad backs, is buy yourself an inversion table. There's two different types. There's the one where you hang from your ankles completely upside down. Don't start with straight upside down, hanging upside down. And if you got a tight back, it's not going to help. What you do is you start with a 10-minute session of laying. You set up, you get on your inversion table, you lock your ankles in there, and you get it so that you can comfortably, just by moving your arms back and forward, go cantilever back and forth. You set it up so you don't go any further than 45 degrees. You don't want straight hanging up right in the beginning. That's expert. You don't do that yet. You just go so that you go 45 degrees. And what you do is you do a 10-minute session of 20 seconds laying flat with the ground, and then 20 seconds at 45 degrees, and then 20 seconds flat, and then 20 seconds 45. And you just bounce back and forth between that. The reason is anything more than 20 seconds, it stretches, but then your muscles start to contract again. So up to 20 seconds, you're getting it stretched enough and you're not letting them recoil and start to pull it back. And eventually, and then what you're also doing is you're pumping the spinal fluid. You have what's called cerebral spinal fluid, and that's what hydrates the discs. And so literally, if your discs are being squished and your back is being squished, you can pump it up. But not with air, you're pumping it up with liquid. You're pumping it up with hydraulic fluid. Hydraulic fluid, that's what these cranes do. That's what these piston things do. And hydraulics does, a liquid under pressure can move mountains. So you can literally stretch your back and rehydrate your disc and reinvigorate these back bones, these back vertebrae, low back. Disc, there's a lot of supplements that you can take. The fish oil. Okay, a fish oil. I've had so many people that have had bad backs and they got on a fish oil and it's just like, wow, cod liver oil, anchovy oil, sardine oil, these types of things. There's a lot of companies that make a lot of different types. Get on a very good clean source of an essential fatty acid like a fish oil. Glucosamine chondroitin, you can get these in capsules. Those are also very helpful. But when people go on this and then they want a pill to work, but they don't do their homework, they don't stretch, they don't get the magnesium in there. They got jammed up kidneys. So that's why I get such success with people, because, again, it's not a cookie cutter method. It's different for everybody. And I really am a master at figuring these hidden things out that, like, your physical therapist would go, yeah, I know about stretching the back, and I know, and the chiropractor knows about, like, well, I know about, like, you know, doing your adjustments. But I didn't know the kidneys did that. I didn't know your heart did that. I didn't know that was, yes. So there's a lot, and I didn't know that the nerves were doing that. One of the other things is that if you have a back injury, so now we get into I had a back injury, I fell skiing, or I had a car crash. and I get my chiropractor work done, or I have my physical therapy and it hasn't really fixed it. There's things that are what's called an interference field, which is you can blow a electromagnetic fuse. And for that, there's what's called the mud packs. I do the mud packs. What the mud packs are doing is essentially, now let me explain something to you. When you look at little children who have perfect posture and they're bouncy in the world and they look like, it's not their muscles that are making them do that. What's making their vertebrae have perfect disc space and be nice and resilient as well as perfect posture is because the electromagnetic field that's going up in between and sandwiching each vertebrae is creating a maglev train effect. So literally what makes the disc height is not the muscles, it's what it is it's electromagnetic frequency. So if you take two magnets and you put a north pole and a south pole together, they attract each other. Click! And if you put a north and a north together, they go woo, and they separate from each other. So opposites attract and the sames oppose each other. Well, what if you could create a magnet that has equal amounts of north pole, south pole, then it does what's called quantum locking, which means it locks in place, but it locks in place with a space, right? And that's what our body is. Now, what happens is when we get injuries that are bad enough, scar tissue forms in there, and then it starts to block the electromagnetic flow, and it blocks the voltage. There is voltage in their body, and in each tissue has to have a certain amount of voltage, especially the back muscles and the back vertebrae. And when the voltage goes down, what happens is then you lose that magnetic effect. And now you have to stand up straight. You have to fight it. So when you lose this ability to connect to the grounding of the world, the ether, which is all real, then now you have to do it. And now it's impossible. And that's why we just, roll forward. And so, wouldn't it be great to turn the energy back on and go back to where the world is now doing it for you? And get back to, and so that's what you can do is the mud packs essentially are, so one of the things I kind of came up with the name of what am I? I'm a quantum reflex analysis practitioner, and with the mud packs, that's very important. So what are the mud packs? Like an electrician, if your wires are twisted up or you blew a fuse, you call the electrician and he comes and he fixes it, right? Well, what if it's a magnetic thing? There aren't magnetic people. But what if it's biologic, a living thing? So I am what is called a biologic electromagnetrician, meaning I'll fix you, right? And what we're fixing is we're fixing this invisible electromagnetic field. And so now when that comes back in place, instead of you having to stack yourself back up, and that's the thing, is the vertebrae starts to go and you start to fall over and you got to pull it back. Well, wouldn't it be great if it went blump like a magnet, like take a cat and let it fall and it always falls on its feet. That's what magnets do. But wouldn't it be great if they came and they locked together where the space is there? And now, instead of me having to pump up the disc automatically rehydrates because the space is already there. And then now the disc then sucks the fluid back in there and reinflates itself. That's the other thing that we can do. And a lot of low back problems, that's what it is you blew a fuse. You blew an electromagnetic fuse, and Western medicine has no way of fixing it. Now, acupuncture, which is acupuncture needles and acupuncture, that type of stuff, and there's some good acupuncturists that don't use needles, they use lasers. The really good acupuncturists use their fingers. They don't poke you with their fingers. They send their electromagnetic energy like a needle. And what they do is they can recharge these areas. The problem with that is that all they're doing is shuffling your energy around from the inside. Whereas sometimes you need to plug the thing into another external source that has more energy than you do. And that's what the mud packs are, is essentially plugging it into an external energetic field that then reunites you back to this world around you. And then the world pulls you back up, right? And then you stand up straight. And then your disc is rehydrated. So a lot of times that's also what I do with people, as well as the chemical, diet type of stuff, figuring out where it's coming from, the stretching, the the body work. That's very important. But this is holistic. It's a whole thing. And we are body, mind, spirit, so you are visible, but you are invisible. And especially, now people have a struggle with this. They kind of go, Jason, this energy stuff is woo-woo. Okay, well, like I say over and over again, have a heart attack, have your heart stop, okay, call the paramedic, and how are they going to get you back to life? The heart stopped, they shock you with the paddles. They literally just hook you up to a battery and go, ta-chunk. And what happens is now your heart starts beating again, and your electromagnetic energy starts beating again, and you start sending signals again. So every living life form is this electromagnetic energy, okay? And that's when it's working perfectly, is everything is, and that also has to do with the fluid of the blood flow. It has to do with the fluid of the lymphatic flow. The lymph has to go in there because it has to clean things out, and your immune system has to always keep a check on. Alan Ott, my buddy here, he says, I'm not what you think I am, you are what I think I am. Yes, and that's the thing. It's just people who do understand that we've been missing a big part of this whole world, especially about our bodies, of what we thought we are. And, the spinal surgeons and the physical therapists that are just dealing completely with just the physical stuff are missing out on the chemical stuff. They're missing out on the electromagnetic stuff. They're missing out on the organ relationships. And when you really think about it logically, well, duh, you have to have this fluid to pump it up. And when you really have done the work that I've done, which is cut people open, you see that a disc is this oily substance. What's in between your fingers is this oily substance. Well, how do you think that oil gets there? It gets in through your diet. You weren't just born with it, and once you're born with it, you better keep replacing it. So this also relates to joints, not just fingers in terms of arthritis joints, because you can get arthritis in your back, is the organ that protects. So in Chinese medicine, which they really understand, and they say what an organ does, your liver, gallbladder, and adrenals are your joints. Let me explain that. Because the liver, gallbladder, your gallbladder is how fat gets into the system. How do you think that fat gets into your brain, gets into your joints, get into your spine while it's being swallowed? You're mostly water, and oil and water doesn't mix. So, like that Dawn commercial, soap has to go into the greasy dishes to make it mix together. Well, that's what your gallbladder is. And when your gallbladder is releasing bile, liquidy bile, then when you eat food, like some good that fish oil or avocado or some nuts or seeds or something like that, when your liver gallbladder releases that bile into that food and it mixes it, now it turns the big fat particles into tiny little fat particles so it can go through the bloodstream and then go into the joints. And so the liver gallbladder is essentially your joints, okay? And then the adrenals. Why the adrenals? Because the adrenals, adrenaline's not just the thing that pumps your heart. The adrenaline is another organ that guards your tissues, but it guards the fluid balance of your tissue. So when many people get dehydrated, they're dehydrated because of an adrenal deficiency, right? When your adrenals are burned out and you've just been not replacing it, not sleeping well enough, and not getting those good hours of sleep and not replacing the adrenals, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and then you dry out. And a person then becomes dehydrated. They don't drink their salt. They don't have enough sea salt in their body. When you don't have enough sea salt in your body, you become dehydrated. When the meat is dry, what do you do to it? You brine it. You brine the meat in some salt water, and then it becomes all moist and juicy. So you want your back, your spine to be juicy. Well, how does it get there? You got to get the food in there. You got to get the fluid. You got to get the oil in there. But it's got to go through those organs. And so those organs are, it's got to come from the food, but the organs have to process it, okay? So, back pain, especially low back pain, is related to all of these issues. And then also activity, okay? So people that even eat well, and don't have atherosclerosis, but don't move. You don't pump those joints. So walking is the best thing, because as we walk, your hips kind of go like this, and it ever so slightly twists their back. And it's this pumping action. And this pumping action pumps the muscles and pumps the low back, and this bounciness. So another good thing that's actually very good for the low back, if you got a low back problem, do these things I've talked about, but also get yourself one of those little jogging trampolines. You'll see people throwing them out all the time. They're cheap. These little jogging trampolines and just bouncing on it, boing, 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 boing. Another thing, these newer inventions called a vibro board. You can buy them on Amazon for like 120 bucks. And you stand on it and it goes blah, 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 and it vibrates. That vibration sends these shock waves, and it pumps fluid, and it actually pumps, and that will actually rehydrate the disc. It will exercise the core muscles. The core muscles are where that low spine is. And so there's also a correlation to people who have weak core muscles, the big beer belly. Now let me get to another thing. A lot of people that got really bad backs have really bad bellies, right? They got the wheat belly. So cut out the wheat belly, cut out the sugar. Also bad bowels. You'll get a lot of people that are constipated for decades of their life, and those are the people that when they do the x-ray on their low back, they go, your back is melting. It's all fused together. Why? Here's another secret. Because if you got a lot of toxins, if you got poop that's sitting there and you're not pooping enough, that poop leaches into the abdominal cavity, and what bone is sitting right on top of your colon? That's your low back. And so these acids will leach into your low back and will melt your back. So people that have chronic gut issues, especially constipation, is you're melting your back. I'm melting, like the witch from the Wizard of Oz. That's what's happening. So many people that have a lot of low back problems, that have lots of chronic bowel issues, get your colonics, make sure you're eating your fiber, get yourself cleaned out. That's where the plant-based diet really helps. It helps to keep you clean. Lots of greens, because the greens are actually something that's anti the acids. Getting the alkaline diet in terms of lots of vegetables, that type of stuff. But healing the low back has a lot to do with the organs that are sitting right there, the intestines and the kidneys. And so again, most people will go, oh, we got to get your back surgery, or you got to have your chiropractor. But how many people have talked about, well, it's your poop, it's your blood flow. These are probably one of the major things that I've seen in my practice, my own life, helped my low back because of these things, fixed a low back, and I've proved it because you can see where my x-rays were before and where they are now. I'm getting better. I'm definitely getting better, and I'm fixing those vertebrae. They are growing back, okay? And a lot of times too, we have gut infection. So a lot of times, so here's the other thing, and I'm going to end on this. Since those low back bones are the thickest, meatiest, chunkiest bones in your body, where are they going? If you're shrinking and you're having osteoporosis, where's it coming from? Where's it going? It's because your body is using the calcium, the minerals, the stored minerals in those bones to pay the immune system. Your immune system are these workers like the firefighters and the police and everything. And if there's a whole bunch of riots going on all over the place, they're out there. So if there's lots of infection, chronic infection of gut infection, sinus infection, tooth infection, you got a person that's got bad teeth, and they've got the root canals that they can't even feel that they have the bad teeth, but it's constantly leaching into their body. Their body is sucking the minerals out of their they're sucking it out of the jaw, sucking it out of the eye orbits. That's why people's eyes are shrinking back into the heads. Why people get the jowls, because it sucks out of these very dense bones. This is a hard bone. The jawbone is a very dense, hard bone. And then it's sucking it out of the back, especially the low back. So these are early warning signs that your body is under chronic infection stress, gingivitis in the teeth, gut infection are the top ones, sinus infection. And these are some of these infections that people have and they go, I'm perfectly healthy. These are some of the people that have these chronic infections that their doctor says, your blood tests come back and you're perfect, but yet you've got arthritis, yet your back is falling apart. How can that be? Because it's this chronic infection. And like I said, one of the deep ones that a lot of people don't know about is the gut infection. Dysbiosis, meaning the wrong living life forms. We're feeding it with too much sugar. We don't poop well enough, and it's melting our back. Okay? So these are one of the top things that I have done to help people with low backs, especially people before they had surgery, or even people that after they had surgery. I can't tell you how many people that have had back surgery and they go, it didn't help. I still have lots of back pain. I know people that have been put on morphine pumps and it still doesn't work, and they're just miserable after. But we fixed them and got them off the morphine pump because it was their kidneys that were jammed up. It was their guts that were jammed up. And so not only did they have the surgery, but so these people are going, why didn't I meet you before this happened? I wish I would have known this before I did this, because even after doing this, the problem was not fixed. So the real original problem was there, and that was the cause of the back problems, was these other issues. And so it's never too late. So even if you've gone and had the back surgery and it's not working and you're still are in pain, let's look at these things. You can always contact me, strategichealing.us, jasoneagle.com. You can find out about me. I can do telehealth stuff. If you live somewhere else in the country or somewhere else in the world, I can talk to you. I can figure these things out. So even if I don't touch you or see you in person, I can help you, and I can direct you to go to see this person where you live, or get this piece of equipment and start doing this. Start doing this stuff on your own. I'll direct you and I'll help you. I'll create a program for you. And I've had huge success with low back pain. And in particular, even ones where the discs are ruptured. Just because you got a ruptured disc doesn't mean that it can't rebuild itself and repair itself. Or a herniated disc. I've seen these things come back. But you got to be prepared to do your work. You got to be prepared to do whatever it takes. And I'm telling you, back pain is one of the leading causes for the opiate addiction. So one of the misused drugs, one of the worst drugs in terms of the opiates is not OxyContin, it's actually tramadol. Tramadol are one of these opiate drugs, and tramadol is one of the top ones that is used for back pain. These anti-inflammatories that are on the market, and some of the anti-inflammatories that they took off the market because they killed a bunch of people, was because of low back pain. Low back pain is not one of the #1 treated conditions, both over the counter and through doctors. It's one of the most common things in the world. And especially if you're a truck driver, high risk. You're a nurse, high risk. You do lots of injury to that stuff. And so, it's something that can be repaired. But the trick is finding out what is your problem and where it's coming from. So, Jason Eagle, your Natural Health Authority. Hey, Alan, it's good to see you. All these people that I see talking to me on Facebook and YouTube, thanks so much. And till next time, bye-bye.